Okay, I think we'll wait just a minute more as more people are joining right now. Names popping up.
Hey, I can't stay for the meeting, but I wanted to tell you that the minutes, I wasn't at that last board meeting, the last general meeting.
Oh, okay.
That's
Thanks,
my
Laura.
Sign off. I'm gonna just put my mute, but I can't be here.
Thanks, Laura.
All right.
Okay, welcome everybody to the San Mateo High School PTO general meeting. First, I'm going to introduce Carlos. He is our interpreter this evening, and he will be giving some directions if you need interpretation services, how to get into the interpreting room. Carlos?
Yeah, thank you. Muy buenas noches. Voy a interpretar esta noche esta reunión del PTO. Abajito de su cámara, si tiene la computadora encendida y ven abajito está lo que dice inglés y español. Pueden escoger el inglés o quedarse en inglés o pueden escoger español. Desafortunadamente, si usted tiene un Chromebook, o sea, la computadora que dice Chromebook, que es un color metálica, creo yo, no funciona la traducción, no tiene ese portal de traducción. Así que les sugerimos que usen su smartphone o tal vez pueden usar otra computadora usando para invitarlos a esta reunión. Otra vez, el Chromebook no está funcionando bien con la traducción, probablemente tienen que usar su smartphone para oír esta conversación. Si ustedes quieren más tarde, vengan a alguien que sabe español, díganle en el chat que hay traducción, pero que tiene que usar su teléfono o otra computadora. Pueden escribir preguntas en el chat para estas señoritas. Muchas gracias. Dan.
Thank you, Carlos. Okay, before we get to our speakers this evening, we have one order of business. We need to approve the minutes from the general meeting on August 25th, 2020. I think, did we put that up in the chat? Is there a way to get that up in the chat? Okay, so just also a notice that tonight we're recording our session, so that way if anybody misses anything or if your Wi-Fi goes out for a little bit and you want to come back and review anything tonight, you're welcome to log on to the PTO website, which is on the San Mateo High School website. And we should have the YouTube video posted for you to just click on and rewatch the video, or if anybody missed it and they want to see it, they can go to the website to watch the YouTube video. Anyway, so first we need to approve the minutes for the general meeting from August 25th. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from August 25th?
I will make a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting of August 25th.
And do I have a second to approve the minutes from the general meeting?
A second.
It has been moved by Lori TC and seconded by Anne Ree that the minutes from August 25th be approved. All those in favor? You can vote. Do we have a poll set up? Oh, we have a poll set up. We'll let that run for a little bit. People are voting. And it's all anonymous. That's what's great about this this technology now. Everybody can vote anonymously. We just have a few more seconds left on the poll. Okay. The minutes have been unanimously approved. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Tonight we have Sergeant Kimber Joyce and Officer Allison Adel here to talk to us. They're from the San Mateo Police Department Youth Services Unit. And they're here to talk to us about online safety, which includes social media, Zoom, which our students are on a regular basis now, cyberbullying, and how we as parents can best support our children, especially with as much time as they're spending online now. I think this is a very timely conversation. Thank you so much, Officer Adel and Sergeant Joyce, for joining us.
I'll go first. Thank you for having us. I'll just introduce myself. My name is Kimber Joyce. I'm the sergeant in charge of our youth services unit, which includes our SROs, our school resource officers, our diversion program, our police activities league, and then also our police explorers. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm going to hand it over to Officer Adel to introduce herself, and we'll get into our slideshow.
Hello, my name is Officer Allison Adel, and thank you for having us tonight. I am a school resource officer here at San Mateo Police Department, and this is my first school year as a school resource officer. Prior to that, I've been with San Mateo for 4 years, and I have worked patrol. And I'm also a Explorer advisor, working closely with our Explorer program. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. See. I feel like I'm kind of a rookie with Zoom, so hopefully everyone can see it. Let's see. Okay. So topics of discussion. So today we're going to talk about internet safety, being smart online, cyberbullying, classrooms, Zoom classroom safety, and supporting your child through this process. So just to kind of talk a little bit about internet safety, it's a huge, vast topic with a lot of different avenues to explore. And so what I didn't want to do was just throw a huge PowerPoint at everyone with a ton of overloading information. So what I really tried to break it down was into little topics that I thought were really important to kind of touch on and encompass internet safety as a whole, just because I feel like we do live a ton of our life on the internet. And so again, trying to just pick out those topics and how they apply to either ourselves or our students and children. So first, I'm kind of just going to talk about the digital footprint, which I've been hearing a lot about, especially with
Officer Adel. I'm
Yes.
sorry to interrupt.
No
We
worries.
don't see your screen.
You can't see. Oh,
Oh,
thank you. Let's see. So yeah, I feel like a rookie at this. So I do have the green button,
yes.
and I have, let's see if this works. Can we see it now?
No.
Yes,
No.
I see it.
Oh, you see it?
Okay.
I see it, yes.
Okay,
Okay.
so I have the green frame that says I'm sharing.
Excellent. Yep, there we go.
Now, yeah,
We're good?
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, okay. And we're all good?
Yes, we're good. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Oops. Okay, so internet safety again. So really kind of talking about the digital footprint. I have recently learned this. I think a lot of people are talking about the social dilemma, which is a documentary that just kind of came out on Netflix, and it really talks about your data and companies, how the internet is collecting it, and how important it is. But basically, it kind of breaks it down into it's a trail of data that you leave behind when you use the internet. One thing that I think a lot of people forget is that it does include your cell phone. I think that's really important for people to understand. It's not just what you search on a computer, but we live a ton of our lives on our phone. And so the digital footprint does include that. But what it can include is your search history, text messages, even if they've been deleted, you can still, that can be backtracked, emails, your likes on social media, which is obviously really big with teenagers, and really anything that you click on. Any website you go to, basically a website assigns an ID to your computer. So it kind of tracks things in where you go. Another big thing, so I'm getting, chats, okay. So another big thing that I really like to emphasize is privacy setting on apps. I think it's always really important to make sure that you turn off your GPS or location on your cell phones, and even within apps, I think is really, really important. You don't know who's able to access that information. You don't want that information getting into the wrong hands. And I think it's also really important to kind of limit your personal information online. So for example, I had a little Instagram profile that I created. So a lot of students obviously, or teens who use social media, will use like their first name, maybe use like their last name, first initials. Sometimes people will use their middle names to kind of switch things up. It's a big thing, obviously, with being in high school, putting the year you graduate. That's a huge accomplishment, and it's an exciting thing. So a lot of times students will put that information in there. And then also tagging, using like the @ for their best friends or their boyfriends. So what I did here in this gray box, you'll see a little Instagram fake account that I created. So her username is Amanda K. Obviously, by that, we don't know if that is maybe her middle name or her last name, but we know her name is Amanda K. And just based off the limited information, so she has SMHS. So based off that, someone can easily figure out that she's a San Mateo High School student in the class of 2020, which then breaks it down into, okay, so now we know probably what city she lives in, where she goes to high school, and even how about old she is, given the fact that Amanda is a class of 2022, she is more than likely, I would say, a junior and typically 15 to 16 years old. And then, of course, she's taken by Jay Walsh, which is a common thing that students will use in their profile. But for example, say Amanda has her Instagram profile to private. However, anyone who wants more information about her can easily click on Jay Walsh's profile, and then they learn more information about who Amanda is, who maybe Jay Walsh is. If his profile is public, they can learn more and more information. So I really think it's important, again, to keep privacy settings as strict as possible, and narrowing that down into GPS and location, but also your social media profiles, of really limiting that information, because people, if they're really motivated to find out who somebody is or a little bit more about information about someone, they can kind of do some digging, and unfortunately they'll use friends to kind of go down that deep dive. So breaking it down into being cautious of online grooming. This is kind of a new concept that I've been learning about. But basically, a groomer is someone who makes an emotional connection with a child online and pressures them into doing things that they typically wouldn't do. And this is kind of done over a slow period of time. So first, it's about making either emotional connection, a relationship, a friendship, befriending somebody online, and kind of creating that alliance with them and that dependency with them. And there are adults who will typically do this, reaching out to children or younger people, and whatever the purpose may be. A lot of the times, a groomer will reach out to a child because they want something from that child. A lot of times it can include either sexting, sending inappropriate photos, pressuring a child to meet up for whatever the reason may be. But again, this is something that is done over a slow period of time. They're trying to gain the trust of the person. And then what they will do is they will slowly push them further and further to see how much they can get from the child, and what the child, how far that child is willing to go, and getting from them. Another thing about internet safety, and we all know this, is not everything that you see online or posted on social media is true. Of course, this applies to a lot of different areas, but I think really what it applies to teenagers and high school students is the fact of rumors being spread around about somebody or their peers that can be really detrimental to somebody, especially in high school. A lot of things are about reputation, and things, not being true about somebody can really hurt them. And, people don't always take into consideration how that might affect somebody's mental health. And so really, doing your own research, taking things for a grain of salt, and not just believing what you see online. And then I'm hoping this works, but I have a little video that I found online, but I thought it was a good video to kind of talk about the digital footprint. It's a short video about a girl who goes on a website to book a trip to Hawaii, which I'm sure we're all dreaming of right now and we wish we could do. But kind of just shows how information and data can be collected about somebody when, going on, for example, Expedia and booking that trip to Hawaii, kind of where that information goes to and the different avenues that are collected. So hopefully this works. Let's see.
This is Liz. She has a surprise for her boyfriend. She hasn't told anyone about her plans, but she can't keep them secret. Google knows Liz's because she uses Gmail. Liz is no stranger to Google. Google already knows Liz by her email account and her internet address, and it knows her contact list. Liz's internet service provider has a lot of the same information about her, including her phone name and street address. When Liz searches for flights, Google also knows that she wants to go to Hawaii. When she clicks on a travel site to buy tickets, it knows the search term she wants to get there. The travel site also knows when she's planning to go to Hawaii, and it knows who she's traveling with and her frequent flyer status. The federal government also knows where and when Liz is traveling, and who's traveling with her, and checks if she's on a terror watch list. From the moment Liz clicked on the travel site, dozens of advertising and marketing firms also have begun tracking her online behavior with small computer programs called cookies that they have embedded in the site. These firms may not know Liz by name, but they know her by unique tracking codes and can follow her movements across the web. They see when she goes to another site to read about the best beaches in Hawaii and immediately start showing her ads for bathing suits. We learn more about Liz's interests when she goes to her favorite shopping site. Google, Facebook, and Twitter also are gathering more information about Liz's behavior with share buttons they have embedded on the shopping site, even if she doesn't click on them. Facebook learns that Liz may be interested in bathing suits through its like button even before she posts a picture of a bikini on her wall. Her post confirms her interest in bathing suits to Facebook, which immediately shows her an ad for a Korean shake. The tracking doesn't stop when Liz goes to the mall. Google knows where Liz is headed because she uses Google Maps. As she drives along, a police car scans her license plate and enters the number into a law enforcement database. Her cell phone carrier, Verizon, also records her movements and includes her location data in a bundle of customer information it sells to data brokers. Those brokers then sell the information to advertisers, marketers, and other businesses. When Liz arrives at the mall, the shopping center tracks her phone's Wi-Fi signal to see which store she enters. And when she walks into a boutique, cameras with facial recognition software take her picture and restore it for years. The cameras are also equipped with software that tracks how much time she spends in each aisle. When Liz buys bathing suits, still may share information about a purchase with data brokers. Before leaving the mall, Liz stops at a pharmacy to pick up a few more things for her trailer. Because Liz signed up for the drugstore's rewards programs, it tracks her prescriptions and shares information with marketers about her purchases, including the right of interest. And through a partnership with the drugstore, Facebook learns that the diet shake I showed her earlier in the day is a pet product. Many of the advertisers and marketers that track Liz claim they cannot identify her, but these firms have a pretty good idea of who she is. Google and Verizon have a much clearer picture of Liz because they know her email contacts, the phone number she's called, and the location she's visited. Data brokers can know a bit more about Liz because they can link many of her online and offline activities. Law enforcement, private investigators, and attorneys can obtain an even better picture of Liz. They can gain access to her private life with a subpoena or court order, which require a lower bond.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Officer Adel. We're having sound issues.
Oh,
We've
no.
lost. Is there a way you could share that link with me and I could post it on our website and they can watch it later on this week?
Absolutely.
That would be great.
Yes. I will send that to you later if that works.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank
Okay.
you.
Perfect. I apologize that you couldn't hear it. But kind of to summarize it, could you guys hear any little bit of it or?
I started going in and out and then at
Got
the
it.
end, just like really quite muted. So
Okay.
somebody texting me telling me there's actually something we could have done on our end to allow it. I don't know if something was wrong on our end as far as the settings. We'll have to look into that for the future. We're all new to this Zoom thing. So thank you everyone for being patient with us. We will get this figured out.
Yes, thank you. But basically the video kind of just summarizes this woman, Liz, and the trip she was booking and how her information quickly spreads and just how her data is tracked. And again, kind of going back to that digital footprint of how what we do on the internet, we always leave a trail behind us. And things can be traced back to us and just kind of predictions and habits can be tracked to you as far as like ads being targeted to you for certain things. And, if you end up purchasing an ad, that goes back into things. But again, just being mindful about the websites that you visit, the information that you provide to a website when you were to purchase something online. And I will send that video in the chat. So kind of next about being smart online. Again, there's a lot of tips and tricks and things that you can do to be smart online and kind of keep your private information and protect yourself and your family. But again, what I've done is kind of just broken down what I feel are the biggest aspects of how to remain safe. So again, going back to that, turning off location and GPS on social media apps. I had Snapchat for a short amount of time a few years ago, and I found it completely terrifying that when they did a location feature, if you had on your, essentially, if you wanted your friends to find you and make your profile private, you could, that somebody could actually zero in on what house you were in. Down to the street and say if you were third house from the corner. Obviously, it's not like a satellite image and it's just little blocks representing houses. But the fact that they could pinpoint you to a specific street, a city, a street, and then even a house, that's extremely concerning. And so really protecting our students, ourselves, our children, I think is a huge thing. And I would recommend everyone kind of going back and checking those apps and making sure that, again, your GPS and location track is set off and your privacy settings are set to private. Think before you post, and it kind of goes back to, I feel like, that golden rule. But, be careful about things that you post that you like. If you message somebody, think about the future. Is that something that you would want your family, or even a future school, college, say you're applying for applications or an employer. Now with Google, a lot of people will search somebody and you can be surprised about the things that can come up. And so really just kind of thinking about those consequences of posting things that you wouldn't want those people to see, even down the line. If it was 5 years from now, things can be traced back. And if there is something that you're worried about that you did post that maybe you don't like, you regret it, I would say just don't leave it. Go back and delete it. So hopefully at least, the link can't be traceable. And if somebody were to find something, that the link would be broken. But really just being accountable for your actions online and thinking before you post. Next, I think Google yourself and do it often. You'd be amazed at what information you find out about you and your family. The good thing is that you can actually reach out to websites and ask them to delete your personal information. I've done it before. I've reached out to white pages. I've Googled myself just to see the information that's out there, and I've reached out to them directly to please remove my information. But also think, scammers will use this to scam people of saying a family member is in trouble. And you're like, oh, it must be true. How do they know my cousin in Wisconsin? Well, through these websites of where your data is sold, they can kind of do tracking and tracking that and using that against you. So I think it's really important to Google yourself, do it often. And if you do see something that you don't agree with, reach out to the website, see if they're able to delete it. And again, goes back to that privacy setting of being mindful about the information that you do put out there. Don't engage with people that you don't know in real life. You'd be surprised at how many calls for service we go to where a person will tell us, oh yeah, my friend did X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, who's your friend? Oh, their name is Joe. Okay, well, how did you meet Joe? What do you know about Joe? Do you know Joe's phone number? Do you know where Joe lives? Anything about Joe that can help us? Oh, I met Joe online. I've never met him in person. So really, I think it's always important to not engage in people that you don't know in real life. You don't know who those people are, whether they're telling you the truth about them. And again, I feel like it kind of comes back to that grooming aspect too. Of you just don't know what their motivation is. And also being careful for signs of a groomer, as they're called, but basically somebody who's constantly messaging nonstop 24/7, asking to keep a conversation private or secret or just between the two of you, asking for personal information, and a threat to blackmail somebody if you're not willing to provide that information that the groomer is asking for. But again, basically it's kind of a slow, drawn out process where they will push somebody to see how far they can go to get them for what they want. And again, being smart online, I think it's really talking to your child, setting ground rules, having open and honest, difficult discussions are not always easy, but I think it's also really important to set an expectation of what their online activity is, and what your expectations are as a parent. Just kind of setting that framework and those rules and guidelines. That way they can't come back at you and say, well, you never told me. To where if everyone is on the same page, at least those rules and expectations are out there. And again, everyone's on that same page. So going into cyberbullying, I know this is a big topic. So again, kind of trying to break it down into a few important aspects. But basically what it can include is either, calling somebody names, humiliating someone, either somebody posting a video or a photo online to hurt you, hurtful comments, spreading rumors is obviously a huge one, and sharing even personal details without information. And this can be done over text, it can be done on a website, it can be done over Snapchat, but any social media application it would apply to. So it just doesn't apply, to one basic thing. So what should you do? Report it and block people. Report the harassment to the website. If you don't know how to block somebody on a website or social media app, you can actually just do a really quick search online. Kind of before this presentation, I was just going through and looking at the different websites, and Instagram will actually walk you through it. Click the top 3 lines in the right-hand corner, go down to the next step, and it'll show you how to do that. If you are being bullied, I recommend taking screenshots of the incident in case you're asked for them later on. I think it's really important. For example, a lot of things happen over Snapchat, and the biggest thing with Snapchat is that it disappears, or so That's the big thing about it, is that you can send something or post a picture and it disappears after somebody views it. So just taking a screenshot of that way, if, you know, an incident is reported to the school or to us, we're able to actually look at it and see it and evaluate everything that you have. Another important thing, like I said, is blocking the person, but the most important is blocking them on all platforms. If somebody's bullying you on Instagram, it's also important to block them on Snapchat, TikTok, Facebook, any contact that you're going to have with them or any avenue for them to reach out to you. Just block them across all of that. Again, tell somebody if you are being bullied, or even if you know somebody. Sometimes people aren't always strong enough to stand up on their own, or they don't want to say something because they're afraid something might happen to them. So it's always important to advocate for your friends, for your peers, and report it to somebody. A teacher, a trusted adult is always a good person. There's wellness counselors at the schools, a coach, parent, mentor, anyone that you really feel safe or comfortable with reporting it. Going back to taking a break, I know this is really hard for teens and students to take a break from social media. A lot of times they do get upset and defiant when you do try and take their phone away. But encouraging, if, you know, taking the phone away is not an option, you know, just take a break from it, set a time limit on screen time, I think is really important. Try not to check messages. So maybe you only check your Instagram once a day, or maybe even just once a week on Thursdays, for example. So that way you can kind of distance yourself and take a break from it. Deleting the apps for a short amount of time, I think, is a really good idea, or maybe even permanently, but just kind of walking away from it and taking that break. And San Mateo High School District actually does have what they call an anonymous alert, which is anyone can use it. And if a student is experiencing any bullying from like a classmate, or has any general safety concerns for themselves or their peer, they can actually go to that link right there and report the incident. So moving on to Zoom, I feel like, again, I'm kind of a rookie at this, trying to figure this whole thing out. And this is a continuous learning adventure for all of us. But I found this online and actually thought it was quite interesting. So in December 2019, Zoom had 10 million daily meeting participants. By the end of April 2020, it had 300 million daily participants. I can only imagine that that number has grown, given that majority of schools are now moving to a distance learning mode for this first semester of school. So I can't even imagine and fathom what the number is, because I feel like April was kind of just the beginning of distance learning and people were still trying to figure it out. But now that we're full distance learning, and schools are, you know, using it more and more. So about classroom safety regarding Zoom, I'd recommend educators change their meeting ID and passwords frequently. With a lot of meetings, sometimes last semester, I can kind of speak to my daughter's class, our teacher would have a different Zoom meeting ID and password. And basically what that does is that prevents people from joining the meeting who are unwanted. It's really easy. And I think what an incident happened earlier at one of the high schools was that it's easy to pass around a meeting ID and password when it's the same one every week for every class for maybe the same teacher. Those uninvited guests, if that gets into the wrong hands, are able to actually just go ahead and join, compared to where if you have random meeting IDs and they change frequently, those are harder to get into. Enabling the waiting room feature, which allows the meeting host to add each participant individually or all at once. And I think, from what I understand, this is actually an automatic feature now. So again, it really just allows the teacher to go through the participants and determine, you know, if everyone can be admitted at once, or, you know, if they want to add them all at once, but kind of gives them a snapshot and a preview of who's trying to join their class prior to the class actually starting, again, to avoid those uninvited guests. Locking the virtual classroom so that no one can join after a session has started. This was kind of explained to me, like once the bell rings, the teacher closes the door, there's no more entering class. It's kind of like that late pass. So again, locking the classroom, that way no uninvited guests can come in. And then if somebody does try and enter, the host can go again back into that waiting room and approve that person to come in. And disabling the screen sharing abilities to host. I know that there have been a lot of incidents in the past where people have come on to Zoom classes to share their screen of inappropriate behavior. So by doing this, basically you only allow the host who is able to share their screen, and then a host can still share the screen sharing abilities with those who are in the class. Yeah, so, okay, let me try and rephrase that. But basically, again, so even though the host is the one who controls the host only, they are still able to share their screen with their students if they need to. And again, going back to disabling the chat feature, so participants can't privately chat with one another, I think is really important. That avoids kind of like that online whole bullying thing. If students aren't able to communicate via the chat, then hopefully, you know, they're not either communicating at all. As far as like online bullying, again, avoids cheating. I think is really important, and a lot of people are worried about how that is all going with distance learning, but just enabling the chat feature overall, I think is really important. And that way things can't be shared again in the chat of like inappropriate topics. And going down to supporting your child through this whole process. So I've tried to kind of encompass distance learning as well as the whole online safety, social media, and bullying. But I think it's really important to offer support. So being patient, understanding, and willing to listen. I think it's also really important from a parent aspect to not void their emotions or downplay their emotions. I feel like emotions are really high right now. Students do have a lot of stress on them with distance learning, shelter in place. The world just isn't what it was, you know, last year at this time. And so really just taking those emotions into account and being patient, understanding, I think is, again, really, really important. Don't be afraid to set boundaries. I think this really comes into social media. And again, setting those expectations, that way everyone is on the same page. So what your expectations are as a parent, and that way they're set out, laid out, and really clear. That way if there is any void in those, then you can revisit that conversation with them. Having check-ins with them, with your student about school, social life, home life, I think is important, you know, whether that's weekly, however you may do it as a family. If your child maybe prefers to communicate over text, or maybe you're at work, you know, and they're in the room doing distance learning, of just sending a simple text of saying, you know, how are you doing? Is there anything I can help you with? Or if, you know, you see them at the dinner table, just asking them simple basic questions. And again, asking open-ended questions, I think is really important. That way you're not pinpointing them into a certain thing, and allowing them to express themselves freely. This is really going into distance learning. So I think it's important to stick to a schedule, set up an effective workspace, help develop practical skills, and promote independence. I think this is a great time for high schoolers to kind of try and, you know, get a taste of things, what, you know, how college might be, of just kind of figuring out navigating classes, doing online learning, and kind of promoting that independence for them of, you know, sticking to a routine, getting to their classes on time, making sure that they're logged in, that their work is turned in a timely effort. It's really hard to remember to turn in your assignment, you know, over distance learning, because you have to consciously either take a picture and then submit it to Google Classroom or whatever platform your teacher might be using, compared to being in school and being reminded, oh, you know, the teacher at the end of class, okay, everyone turn in your assignment, and you're seeing your peers physically do it. Distance learning, it's a bit, I feel like, more on your own and accountability. And then if you are seeing any concerns that you might have, getting help early for your students. So using resources such as chatting with a wellness counselor. Wellness counselors are still available. Students are able to reach out to them and set up wellness appointments. They're actually doing them over, I believe, Zooms. And so they are checking in with students. So I would encourage that. Speaking to school administrators, teachers, and medical professions, if you're having any mental health concerns with your student, I think it's really important to just kind of get help early on. And I think it goes back to asking them those questions and having check-ins with them to see how they are doing. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Officer Adel. So if anybody has questions, if you could send them, if you go into the chat and you go to the San Mateo High School PTO, we're taking questions there, and we can relay them to our to Officer Adel or Sergeant Joyce. So to start, our first question is, if you are prosecuted for illegally entering into students' private accounts and sharing the information therein, such as ACT, SAT scores, parental information, which is a federal crime, what is the punishment?
And that was going into a student's account?
Yeah, a student's private account.
And do we know if that's like referring to their email?
I don't
It's
know.
referring to all the students have an account where they have a login and a password, and in there is their SAT scores or ACT scores, all their grades and all their transcripts. So if another student hacks in to that account and retrieves that information and starts disseminating it, I think that's the question.
And then the question was, what is the punishment for that?
Yeah, what is the punishment, and does it go on your permanent record?
So I couldn't tell you exactly what the punishment would be. And then it would kind of be determined by the district attorney whether there's prosecution or not.
And I'll jump in. If they are sharing, grabbing personal information and using it falsely, that's not their own information, that is a felony. So I can't speak to federally, but that would be a felony to do. It all depends on what they're doing with that information. If they're going into hacking into the account and not necessarily doing anything with that information, I'm not quite sure where that would fall. I'm sure it would be something illegal, and we'd have to figure that out. But it's more what happens with that information is the biggie.
Okay. So that leads into, is all cyberbullying illegal at state and federal level?
So again, I can't speak to the federal level. And then as far as cyberbullying, it would have to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. And if you're convicted, will that hurt your college admissions?
It could. I would imagine that college applications will ask if you've been convicted of a crime. And if you were convicted, then you would have to indicate yes, but I'm not too familiar with exactly the wording on a college application. So it could potentially, it would depend on if it asks that question or not.
Okay. Next question. Does the school have a duty to provide safe and secure networks to prevent these incidents?
I think that's outside of our scope. I think that would be a school representative to answer that question.
Thank you. So our next question is, how often should passwords be changed?
I would say a good rule of thumb is maybe every 30 to 60 days.
I also like that you said to Google your name and see see what shows up, right?
It's quite interesting. I think a lot of people, if they actually did it and kind of did a deeper dive into, rather than just, the initial 10 searches that Google shows you, you would be surprised at what information you could find out either about you or even your family members, and how that information crosses and it creates association and connections with people.
Okay. And then I'm actually being requested to ask Yvonne if she knows about that previous question. Yvonne is our principal, Yvonne Mishu. Does the school have a duty to provide safe and secure networks to prevent these incidents? Yvonne?
So, yeah. I would have to probably ask our director of technology in terms of safe and secure, just because the devices are being used at home and we do provide the hotspots. I know that on the Chromebooks from school, There is some software on there to prevent students from accessing certain websites and things like that. However, if a student is using their own device, I would say that is kind of a parental responsibility of monitoring what their students are doing on their devices. But I know that the Chromebooks that we distribute do have software on there to prevent students from getting onto sites that should not be accessed by minors.
Thanks, Yvonne. I think the question is about people hacking into other kids' Aries accounts. So we're hearing that a lot of kids are getting their Aries accounts hacked because everybody knows the pattern for their student ID. Like, I guess there's a pattern to it. I haven't done that much research into it, but people can figure out what everybody's email addresses are. And so people go in to other people's accounts using that. So I guess the question is there a way we can prevent this from happening? Is there a more secure way we can create email accounts even so that these kids stop getting their email accounts hacked?
So I know that had come up, and I think Anne was asking the question because there was an incident where students found out kind of the way that the district was setting up email accounts. Again, we brought that information to the director of technology. One of the issue comes is that if a student forgets their password or doesn't, then there's no way that we can help the student get back into their account if those things are changed. However, it has been a discussion at the district that students should be changing their password for exactly that reason, because of something that happened last year. So I would have to find out further, because that would be a director of technology in the technology department, where we had brought it to their attention about the ability for students to kind of figure out if they have, each other's student IDs, their birth dates, their graduation year, that they could put together the chain, excuse me, of information in order to get in. And that's, how the district kind of set it up in order to create so many email accounts for each of our students in the district. And so I would have to find out more in terms of the director of technology and where we are with that. And I know one of the other things that came up in Officer Addle's presentation that we are addressing is kind of that Zoom bombing and the authentication. And so a number of, we started off the year, and because this is all like new and we are all learning and trying to keep ahead of, all of the different things that are happening with Zoom, is the authentication piece of it, where Zoom, if we set up certain parameters and certain settings within Zoom, it will not allow anybody that does not have a district email account in, period. Which does cause some problems. If a teacher were to invite a guest speaker in, we wouldn't be allowed to have it unless we generated a guest email account to allow that guest speaker in. And then what we also found out was a lot of our teachers are using waiting rooms, which overrides the authentication. And so we're trying to put in all these safe, guards, and then having teachers create waiting rooms so they can see who's entering, and then allowing them in and taking attendance. But apparently that overrides the authentication. And so a student could change their screen name and pretend they're somebody else and go into your waiting room, and then all of a sudden kind of Zoom bomb a classroom. And so we are finding that all out, as each day goes on, that like a teacher reports something happened, and then we investigate and we're like, oh my gosh, we had no idea, that was happening. And then we're trying to keep up with everything in terms of, safeguards for our students. So I just wanted to add that in because I heard that in the presentation about like, how do you prevent, all of these things happening? And so we're trying to stay ahead of the game, and it's a difficult battle.
Yeah, it's a learning process, right? I mean, as we go, it's all pretty new for us to be using this at the school level. So I
But
guess
certainly I would, the incidence of students getting into each other accounts. No one has brought that to my attention this year. And so if that is happening, I need to know about it so then I can go up the chain of command and have the director of technology look into, how do we set up something that basically forces students to change their password on, a 30, 60 or 90 day, basis. And then, making sure that, students are keeping track of their passwords. I know it's, as an
Yeah.
adult, I have a difficult time whenever I'm like asked to change something and, where to store it and write it down so I remember it and not try to repeat them and rotate. It can be a little overwhelming. So.
That's true. I hate that when they say you need to change your password. I'm like, wait, I've already used the 2 I have. It's like, wait, I should definitely have more than 2.
Yeah.
And there's apps for that too, right? They'll create your passwords.
Yep.
So considering that people do understand how our ID works, what kind of information could actually be leaked? What kind of information, is there really that much information that they get from hacking into a student's account?
Well, all the parents that are on here, like, that have accounts, you can see what is there. Students do not have the ability, they are read-only accounts, so students can't, for Aries, they can't change anything, but obviously birth date is in there,
So
the
it's
student
everything that
ID
was
number.
basically,
Yeah.
you would see that that's what people who hack in actually have information of. So grades and attendance, address, that sort of stuff. Okay, well, that's good to know. Change your passwords more frequently and don't make them too easy. Who is our director of technology for the district?
Simon Bettis, Bettis. So you can feel free to email him as well because he is aware of, the issues with generating a kind of, I guess, a specific way in which we set up, passwords so students remember them and know how to get into their accounts at the start of school. So yes, Simon Bettis is our director of technology.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I think we've gotten through most of the questions or all of the questions. I don't have any questions. I'll take a couple minutes though, if anybody wants to put a question in. Send it to SMHS PTO and we can answer that. Also, Officer Adel, actually everybody listening, I was texted that the way to share a video, when you go to your share, your screen, you also have to do share, what was it?
I think it's share computer audio or something like that.
Or
up at the
computer
top.
sound.
Yeah, so it's also one of the options when you go to screen share, you do share computer sound. So we learned something tonight. If you're sharing a video, also share the sound. So we can. But I also received the link that you sent me, Officer Adel. So I'll be sure to put that on our website so everyone can view that that video. I'd be curious to see, how much they get from you just for searching on how to take a trip to Hawaii and signing up for a hotel.
Yeah, and I think a little bit of it is kind of flabbergasted in the sense of like, it talked about walking into a store and them using facial recognition and, basically watching how long you walk down each aisle. I think that's a little bit much, but you'll kind of see from the video, it's just quite interesting of how much data they can collect from you and how much information they know about you just based on visiting that website, and then going to a store and using your credit card and, your GPS driving to the store. And I put the link in the chat for everyone as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I see that there. And like I said, if I will post it to our website also with the YouTube link for this video tonight. That being said, I think this was really informative. Thank you so much, Officer Adel and Sergeant Joyce. I think this is definitely coming at a good time when our students are constantly on Zoom and they do all their homework online now. And the only way that students can connect, or most people can connect, is all through the internet. So safety at this point through the internet is really important. And this was a great talk tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And with that, everybody have a great night. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.